All right, when we're doing domain and range, first of all, domain in this problem, domain is understood to be how far left to right the graph goes. So it's left to right. So it's how far the graph goes left to right, and then we either use parentheses or brackets depending on the context of the problem. And the 2 is essentially just a comma. So it's how the number how far left it goes, comma, how far right it goes. And then for range, it's going to be not on this problem, but in subsequent ones that we do. Range is what I meant to write. Range is going to be how low to how high the graph goes. Now, that also has brackets or parentheses on them. Now, domain, being left to right, this is a set of x values. And the range is going to represent the set of y values. And so when we're looking at the graph, to answer this question of domain, you have the option to write interval or set notation. I'm going to default to interval notation because it's the one that's more commonly used in the higher math classes. The set notation is also nice with the alligators. But anyway, we're going to go here. For domain, starting with this graph, I'm just going to identify how far left the graph goes to how far right the graph goes. And you see that it touches at -11, and then we have an open dot here at 10. So I'm really, in my interval for domain, going to write -11 and then 10. These are the bookends of this graph. And so what I do is I put a bracket on -11 because that is a closed dot, and closed dots translate to brackets. And then this is an open dot at 10, so this is a parentheses to close. And then you put a comma in the middle, and that will be your interval notation solution for domain. So in doing range, if you were supposed to, this one just says do domain. What we do is go low to high. And so the lowest value is this -11. That's not included. And the highest value is going to be this 2, which is shown up twice on this graph. We're going to see a bunch more examples of just range, but -11 to 2 would be the range if it asked for it. So range, the low value is -11, 2, or all the way up to the value of -2. Now, it touches -2. It does not touch -11. So if we were supposed to do range on this problem, that's the answer that we would have put, but we only had to do the domain, so input the domain, and we'll be good to go for this problem. So in this domain question, we have nice set solid dots to look at. And so we're just going to focus on the domain here. I'm not going to do the range for this problem. I'll do ranges in a moment. This is just how far left it goes. Nice solid dot there at -1, and then a nice solid dot here at 8. And so we write -1, comma 8, bracket both of them because they are both included dots. Very simple one here. So again, just how far left to right. And the 2 turns into a comma. This is the leftmost value. That's the rightmost value. All right, on this one, we're just looking again at the domain. Both the endpoints are open. So this time, we figure out how far left it goes to -11, how far right it goes to 10, and domain is written left to right. And so we go -11, comma 10. And because they're both open, instead of brackets, we use parentheses to show that we don't include the endpoints. Switching gears to range, what we're doing is figuring out low to high. This is the lowest value. This is the highest value. And what we're going to do this time is let the endpoints be our guide, but there is an extra little top of a parabolic curve there. It's a maximum, relative maximum. That also could have gone further and become the actual highest point. But the endpoint is the guide because it's the same height as that one there. The highest height is 6, y equals 6. And the lowest value is -4. Now we're looking at y heights, not the x values. Don't get distracted by the 1. Don't get distracted by the 10. They don't mean anything for range. Range is just low to high. And so the lowest value is -4, and the 2 just turns into a comma, and then 6. And because we have an open dot at the -4, we want to use a parentheses on it. And then the top is a solid dot, so we're going to use a bracket there. So that's the range here, the endpoints being our guides. And also, I said solid dot at 6. The highest height being curved here and touching also works as our solid dot. All right, this time we have open dots at the bottom and the top, and they are the most extreme values. This is the highest height here at 8. So this is y equals 8 as our high, and then this is our the lowest one. If we're on the x-axis is actually the line y equals 0. So if you're ever touching the x-axis, that is the y value on it. So when we're doing range, again, range is low to high. So we're going to say our lowest value was 0, comma, the highest high was 8, and then we're not touching either one of them, so we use parenthesis on both. Biggest mistake people do is they just do them out of order because our brain says this comes first because we're reading the graph left to right, but we have to translate to be low to high. All right, so on this problem is where things get tricky with range. Domain wouldn't have been bad, just -10 to 10, not a problem. Open parentheses, close parentheses. Side note, I guess I'll just write the domain just because I talked about it. Domain would have been -10 to 10, bracket there, open parentheses. But that wasn't the question. The question is range. For the range, it's how far low to high it goes. Low to high. If you just keep thinking that, it will guide you to get the right answer. Now, the lowest value might stand out to you as that dot. The highest value, don't let this dot distract you. This is not the highest height. It doesn't do anything to the range at all. The range includes any value that you have a y height across the plane this whole way. These are all y heights that are included all the way to the highest one, which is right here at 6. So let the graph in your mind's eye see this is the lowest, and then you start moving up to the highest height, which is that spot there. Now I got a lot of writing on there, so I'm going to clear that up because it looks ugly. But what we're doing is starting at the lowest there at -4 and going up to 6. So we go -4, lowest value, y equals, as our low, and then the highest value is 6. So low, -4, the 2 translates into a comma, and then 6. Now, the -4 is a solid dot, is touched, so we're going to do a solid bracket there. And then the 6 is touched at that coordinate right here. We actually touch 6, even though it's bounding and bending and bouncing off of it. It does actually touch 6, and so we bracket that also. Do not let this open dot confuse you and mess you up and put a parenthesis. It has nothing to do with the range. So number 7 is very similar, this next example here, where we've got a lowest low and a highest high that do not pay attention at all to the endpoints. And so let me use the rectangle tool here to highlight for us. The lowest value is on this -8, and the highest value is on this 5. And so we can see, make a little more clearly with that box there, that this is your highest, y equals 5, and this is your lowest, y equals -8. So the range is, again, always low to high. So our lowest value is simply -8. 2 is comma. The high value is 5. because it actually physically touches this grid line here and physically touches this grid line there. These are both brackets, just like the previous problem. It's just neither one of them had anything to do with the endpoints. So don't let the endpoints be your guide. Let the lowest and the highest values the graph touches be your guide. All right, on this one, we're going to focus on the bottom is kind of the weird part where things might get weird. But notice how there is an endpoint and it lines up very nicely over there at the bottom. Both the parabola and the endpoint are at the same height. So we can focus on -9 either way. Touches here or it touches there. Up top, this is headed toward 11 but doesn't quite touch it. So the range, we end it at 11, y equals 11, but it's not included, and it started at -9 as the lowest value. So our range is -9, comma, 11, bracket on the -9, parenthesis on the 11. What we're going to find later in our math career is that this graph doesn't actually have a highest height. It's actually going up forever with no top bound because it doesn't ever get to its highest height. It gets infinitely close to 11. Height of 11. Kind of weird. All right, on this final range example, very similar to a previous one it did, but it's nice to have an extra. Notice the lowest value is this guy right here at the minimum of the curve. And then there's another highest height up here at the 8. Does not depend on the endpoints. The endpoints don't affect the max and min. So this lowest value is y equals 1. The highest value is y equals 8. So my range is going to be bracket 1, comma 8, bracket. Again, not depending on these two endpoints. The domain would, but not the range.